Fox in the basement.
The winter meetings have concluded. The White Sox, according to CBS Sports, one of the big winners of the winter meetings. And I'm bringing James Fox in from FutureSox to kick off this show. James follows all the prospects. He's probably got his finger on the pulse of the two Rule 5 selections. And who better to talk to and to kick off Sox in the basement than with James Fox of FutureSox? How are you, buddy?
Oh, I'm good, man. Yeah, always off-season winners, right? It's always, and they never do anything when the games actually start.
They should start putting up banners for all the times they win something like the winter meetings, right?
How ominous was it for you? Like, did you watch the draft lottery? So we did a live show.
I watched your live show. No. Hold on. I watched your show. I was like, I'm going to watch. I got in there late. I got to see the back end of them making the selections. I watched your reaction. I saw how excited you were. It made me excited that you guys were excited about the first pick.
Yeah, good. And I think there were a lot of fans that were like, oh, God, when they saw Rick Hahn there, they're just like having like, they're like, we're screwed. We're getting the 7th pick. And I was like, nah, guys, I think Rick is going to hook us up here. And we have the Pope on our side. So very clearly.
Yeah, the Pope may have made a difference. You get the number 1 overall pick. And here's the thing. There's a consensus right now. And that may change. But and tell me if I'm saying the name wrong. Rock Chalowski is
oh yeah, dude. South Sider, baby. Rock Chalowski. Yeah.
He's going to fit right in if they pick him. Tell me. So now Chris Getz played it cool. He tried to act like I'm just starting to learn about the guys at the top of the draft. I'm sure he knows who this guy is. If every national pundit who covers baseball is saying that's probably who they're picking. They won a sweepstakes to get this guy. He's what I want, a shortstop, because you can move a shortstop anywhere if he doesn't work out at short. So that means he's athletic. And I already saw something like he used to be like not only like the quarterback of his football team, but like the team captain. And that's how he acts when he's out on the field. You want guys like that in your organization. I got pumped just reading a little bit about him. Can you tell me more?
Yeah, so he was College Player of the Year last year as a sophomore. That's a little bit rare. So I will say, like, guys like this don't make it to school usually, which is why you keep seeing, best shortstop prospect since Dansby Swanson, best one since Troy Tulowitzki, right? I personally think a good comp is like Alex Bregman if he were able to stick at shortstop, which, like, really good player, right? If that works out. Yeah, like guys like this go pro out of high school. He had a high number. He had a UCLA commit. He really wanted to go. But yeah, this guy was a star, like in Arizona. He was one of these high school stars. He was like the 30th ranked player in the class 3 years ago, and he decided to go to school, and he really took off last year. He's a definite shortstop. I don't know if it's like plus power, but it's definitely above average power, above average hit. I mean, it is, like, I think people have seen what Dansby Swanson is now, and they're like, oh, that's not that good. I mean, that, if you get a definite big leaguer that's your starting shortstop, I mean, they talk about aircraft carriers, right? Like this team, I don't know that this team has a star on it. I think they got a lot of young players that you and I have talked about, and I like a lot of them, but they need a star. This guy could be a star. Hey, look, it's not a lock because it's 7 months from now, and there are other good players in this class, but like from what I've heard and from what I think, it would be kind of a surprise 7 months from now if it's not Rock Chalowski. But yeah, like there are a couple other guys in this class too.
Yeah, because essentially they're going to play another college season, right, before the draft happens. I don't know exactly how it all lines up, or he'll at least be partway through a college season. So all the guys that are right behind him have a chance to just stand up and say, no, I'm the number 1 pick, correct?
100%. Yeah. And they have like the year that Paul Skeens was taken, right? Like Paul Skeens had transferred from Air Force to LSU, and he was a hitter and pitcher. And look, he was seen as like this top 10 pick, right? But he wasn't Paul Skeens yet, right? So yeah, like something could happen where like something just like hits you in the face and it's like, oh my God, this guy's a no-doubter. This is who we have to take. But I mean, right now that looks to be Rock Chalowski. And then there is another player, Grady Emerson, who's a high school shortstop out of Texas. And this is your typical like big power, left-handed hitting, 6'2", like shortstop, right? And I think both of these guys would have been the number one pick in the previous two drafts. But the way I look at this, like Grady Emerson's ceiling has to be so much higher than Rock Chalowski's to pass on like the proximity to majors and the floor that Rock Chalowski has. You know what I mean? Like this guy, you're talking about a guy who, you know, could finish next baseball season at Double-A and be in the majors potentially by like mid-season 2027 when you also have Teal and Montgomery and all these other guys. That's where, like, it makes a lot of sense. They'll take the best guy with the highest upside, most likely. I just think that'll end up still being Chalowski. Like, there's other factors with this, obviously, like, you know, the nerd in me, like, the other stuff that, like, having the number one pick means and, like, what that means for the rest of the class and stuff. Like, we can get into that. But, yeah, it was a pretty exciting day. It really is. Like, when Chris Getz says that people don't understand, like, how big it is for the organization, he's not lying. It was a pretty massive day on Tuesday when this happened.
I have a nerdy question for you. We're going to talk Rule 5, but before we get to that, something that I picked up in your last response, the fact that the two names, Chalowski and the guy right behind him, could be the number one pick in the last two drafts. And I remember 2 years ago when the draft lottery was coming, the White Sox were doing terribly, and I remember you saying, "This stinks. They have no chance at the number one overall pick." And they're in a bad position. And now looking back at that and looking at where they're at right now, you sound far more positive and really pumped up about this pick. Is it fair to say that now after they've missed that draft lotto pick last year, it's okay because they're getting the number one pick this year?
Oh, yeah. I think it worked out for them in the end, for sure. I mean, look, in theory, you could have had two high picks in a row, right, if the rules weren't this way. But the way the rules are, they benefited from them. The guy they took in last year's draft, who we talked about extensively, obviously, Billy Carlson. I mean, that's like a perfectly fine pick at 10, right? Like that's a great outcome, and it allows you to like get in the top of a better draft, which is what this is. So that's good. You know, look, the big thing here, and this is what I'll say. Like a lot of people I've heard, like they talked about Jerry Reinsdorf's cheapness, and you and I are no strangers to that. Like that's fine. Like I'm not gonna defend Jerry on your show, but like they do spend a ton on the draft. You know, they don't really deserve to have their back padded for that, but they do. Like that's not an issue. This is what I'll say. The most that anybody's ever signed for in like the modern draft is $9.3 million. Okay. That's an important number because the bonus pool at number one, it's not out yet, but it should be like right around 11.5 million. Right. So even if Rock Chalowski or Grady Emerson, you could break the record with one of those players and pay them $10 million. You'd still have that extra $1.5 million to use on the rest of your draft. So when you pick at 42, you could theoretically get a top 20 player in the class by paying them more money, essentially. So, like, look, the player at number one that hopefully turns into a superstar for you and leads this thing into the future is, like, the number one thing. That's the best part of this. But the bonus pool flexibility is huge too.
That's really interesting. That's what I was going to ask you about. The idea that the slot gives far more money than what the biggest contract ever handed out was, and they could use that money later on. So now all of a sudden, and that's the thing I want people to remember, or correct me if I'm wrong, James. I think we talked about it together on this show before. It sometimes doesn't matter where you're picking because players are holding out saying, oh, well, I'm not going to sign for that because they notice somebody else has extra money, even if they get drafted later on in the draft. So the Sox can get a really good pick in the second round because they'll have a little bit of extra money, and players and their agents are going to know that, correct?
Yeah, and they've done this the past 2 years with Jaden Foskey and Caleb Bonnemer, who's like a top 50 prospect in baseball right now. But what they'd had to do is they would take money from the back of their draft, you know, and sign guys for like $10,000 and then use that money to pay for a guy in the second round. They wouldn't have to do that this time. So just like in theory, right, they pick at 42. That pick could be worth about $2.5 million, okay? You could have we'll just say a high school pitcher, because those are the types of guys who are really good but teams are scared of, so they don't draft them early. You could call a guy or his agent and be like, look, if you can get to the 42nd pick, we have $4.5 million to give you, right? Which means anybody in front of 42 that tries to select that guy basically has to pay more than $4.5 million, or that player's not going to agree to sign with that team. That's how you push a guy down to you. So it's just, yeah, the baseball draft's weird like that. It's not like you watch the NFL draft on a Sunday and you're like, oh, take Mel Kiper's best guy. Like, it's a no-brainer. Baseball's not like that because, like, these guys can go to school or go back to school. There's all sorts of, like, different ramifications.
That's awesome. All right, we're going to get into Rule 5. Before we do that, for any of you out there looking for exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales. They're not in your kitchen. They're not sitting on your couch. You go to them. The reason you do that is the window salespeople that show up at your place bring these tiny little dingy, compact example windows that they've been sitting in their trunk. They're broken. They're trying to tell you, imagine what this would look like. Go to the showroom, see everything, see all the little add-ons and the features. Don't look at a picture inside of a sales book. There's an owner in showroom and on site, all Window and Door Superstore installers. They don't farm out the work. They've been doing it that way in Oak Forest since 1985 with all major brands custom made and no stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is located a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. And James Fox of FutureSox joining me, and Ed will be in here in just a moment for the back half of the show, and the Sox Nerd is on here. And I'm trying really hard to not talk about the last two times that the White Sox had a number one overall pick, because I have a sneaking suspicion he'll have that inside of his trivia. So we'll move on from that draft choice. And one of the other reasons, James, that I think that CBS Sports and others said that the White Sox were winners in a very slow winter meetings. I mean, overall, there were a couple big names that were signed, but a very slow winter meetings is because they go into the Rule 5 draft, they make two selections, and they're the only team to make a second selection in the draft. They go for two pitchers. One looks like the first guy that they went out and got looks like he could end up being a starter, but most likely they'll do the same thing that they've done before with Rule 5 guys, give him a chance, and then the guy hopefully ends up in the bullpen so they can hang on to him, and that's Jedrickson Paez, I think is how you say his name. You could correct me if I'm wrong. And then Alexander Alberto looks like a guy with great stuff who is a bullpen arm. Am I right or wrong? Tell me about these guys.
No, you're right. I thought it was a little strange. Like, it's fine, right? But so they went for, like, really high upside. So if you look, I'm sure you looked at stats, right? And the thing that's, like, glaring is there's not high-level minors success. These guys are basically, like, taken out of high A. Now, look, I think they wanted the most upside possible. They saw two guys who get, like, Jedrickson Paez. So MLB Pipeline right away hiked him into the White Sox top 20 prospects. This guy was
15, I believe, is where they put him.
Yeah, so he was a top 100 prospect for Fangraphs coming into the season. He's like he's not a soft tosser, but he's like 92 to 93 with a bunch of pitches. He's like a command guy, like future starter traits. He got hurt. He hurt his calf and missed 3 months prior to his promotion to Double-A. So my thought is he would have went to Double-A, and if he was good, Boston probably would have protected him. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to stick all year, because it's going to be kind of tough. I could see him maybe like as an opener, and then you use your starter after him, or you let him do mop-up work. But him being one of the 8 guys in a big league bullpen might be a little bit tough. You got to keep him for 90 days active. I'm sure they'll use IL stints and whatever. But this is definitely the guy who they thought was the highest upside guy. They think he's a future starter. Remember, after this season, he could be optioned like anybody else and just be like a starter at Birmingham or whatever. But you do have to get through the 26th season with him on the roster for the most part. And then Alexander Alberto is fascinating. 6'8", 200 pounds. So like this rail thin guy.
I mean, wow.
Yeah. So I know. So there's actually some comparisons to Emmanuel Clase. Like, look, I don't know that he's going to be him, right? But because it's all cutters. He throws like a high 90s cutter and then a slider, and that's all he throws. So like, somebody texted me and they said, Bannister loves this guy because it's 7 feet of extension and 100-mile-an-hour cutter. Now, it's a little bit of an embellishment, right? Like, I think it's more 97, 98. But yeah, so he's just going to pitch at the back end of the bullpen and throw cutters all day. So we'll see if he sticks. They'll obviously both go to spring training. I see on, all those roster projections and stuff, like we'll see if they're on there. Because remember, like if they if they cut one of these guys, they go through waivers and then they get offered back to their original team. That's how the White Sox got Mike Vasil last year. Somebody took him in Rule 5. I think it was Tampa. And then he didn't make their team. And then he went on waivers and the White Sox claimed him and then they kept him all year. So this is similar to that. It's going to be tough to replicate the success that they had in 2025 with Shane Smith and Mike Vasil, but it seems like they're going to try here with like two upside, really young guys. Paez is 21. I think Alberto's 23.
Interesting. And then for the first time, I think in about a decade, they lost a guy in the Rule 5 draft. And Chris Getz is like, it's sad to see Peyton Pallette go, but they had room if they really wanted to protect him, right? I think they're at 37 on the 40-man roster, so they're not really going to miss him as much as he said in that quote, right?
Well, so this is controversial because I like Peyton Pallette. There's a lot of people who, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe they didn't protect him. Chris, when Peyton Pallette wasn't up and pitching for the White Sox in September, that was a red flag for me because generally guys who you're going to add, they do this a lot, right? They give you your audition in September and just add you early. He would have been part of this bullpen that's throwing random veterans. He wasn't, so that means the org's down on him a little bit. He's a smaller righty. He does project kind of as like a leverage reliever. So he was a second-round pick out of Arkansas, I believe, in 2022. They thought he could start. It didn't work. So he's one of these guys who looked like a former first-rounder, and then he had Tommy John in college. The curveball backed up a little bit. Here's the thing. He doesn't get a much extension on the mound. And my guess is Brian Bannister's not a huge fan. Brian Bannister wasn't in the org at the time. They decided that it wasn't worth protecting him. And we'll see if, the Guardians were right and he can make that team. But, they obviously don't think that they're going to miss him and he could end up back. We'll see if that roster decision is correct or not.
All right, before I let you go, James, I went on Fangraph's roster resource just to see, after you add these two guys in the Rule 5 draft, what the projections were. And I found it fascinating that, like, you just had an acquisition in Chris Murphy. I've heard about Duncan Davitt a few times this offseason. And right now, and Tanner McDougal, I've heard, as somebody that it sounds like they want to get up here at some point during the season. All three of them not even projected to make the opening day roster. I'm not saying that roster resource is right, but I think it points out it's going to be one hell of a competition during spring training. And I think they're still going to go out and sign a couple of arms for that bullpen. What do you think?
Yeah, I think a closer is definitely coming. The fact that they're talking to Pete Fairbanks excites me. I didn't think they were going to sign anybody that good to close. I think Pete Fairbanks could close for a contender. So the fact that he's interested in them and they're interested in him, I think is kind of cool. Dustin May is a guy who's been talked about as your second starter. The rumor is that the White Sox are actually talking to Dustin May to potentially convert into a closer. So that's interesting too. Getz is on record as saying that they want another starter. So I do think another veteran starter is coming. And then and we haven't even talked about the bats. I do think there's at least, a left-handed hitting corner infielder and probably one outfielder coming too. So I do think they have some moves left.
Any names that make sense to you or that you're hearing?
I mean, Ryan O'Hearn makes a ton of sense to me. I don't know how much they're allowed to spend. I think Ryan O'Hearn isn't settling for some sort of 1-year deal, right? Can they go 2 years and $22 million right now? I mean, I hope so. Right. But I think both of us, I don't know what they're able to spend. They've talked to the agent. So I think something like that makes sense. I thought a guy like Mike Yastrzemski made sense and he signed with the Braves yesterday. So, I don't know. I'm curious to see if this is all post-hype type guy, JJ Bleday, former first rounder that hasn't really gotten a huge chance. Is it going to be guys like that or is it going to be a more real type veteran than that? I don't know. We'll see, but I do think additions are coming.
Yeah, I think they're coming too, and I think that you see somebody like Pete Alonso get signed. You're seeing sluggers in the winter meetings between Schwarber and Alonso, and you see the White Sox looking to add home runs. So it's going to set the market for them. They may have to wait a little bit if there's going to be a run on them based upon their budget, but I do think there's moves coming. I agree with you, James. James Fox, you can hear him on FutureSox. Definitely check that out. And I always appreciate when you come on. That's some great stuff. And if you weren't excited about the winter meetings because you didn't see a big move from the Sox. Hopefully you're intrigued at least by what they were able to do. Thanks so much, James.
Thanks, Chris.
As Ed gets in here on Sox in the Basement, I want to remind you about the $1,000 guest bounty. Yes, somebody is going to win $1,000, a cool G, just by helping us bring in a great guest this offseason. Don Cooper's already been on. There's a bunch of other ones that we're working on. I'm just trying to figure out. Some of them might be on a location. And that's one of the delays right now, is trying to work all that out, especially during the holiday season. So I think it's really going to get going starting in January. That's my goal. But the idea is we're going to have some great guests. You're going to vote during spring training on which ones that you like the best. And the best guest of the offseason, the person that helped us get that guest, gets the $1,000. Could be baseball related or non-baseball related. It's all brought to you by Cork and Carry at the Park at the corner of 33rd and Princeton, in the shadow of the ballpark, with an award-winning menu of burgers and ballpark favorites, extensive bar rotation of craft beers, familiar favorites, spirits, and wines. They are your home base for White Sox pregame, postgame, and in-game viewing parties. And don't forget about the location in Beverly at 10614 Southwestern Avenue. See everything they're doing and check out the decor. They always do it up big, especially at the Western location at corkandcarry.com, or in person. Get over there in person. Ed, what did you think about what James Fox said? The Rule 5 pitchers are very intriguing. Also, some of the names he's talking about: Pete Fairbanks, Dustin May, guys that the White Sox are looking at. You got the number 1 overall pick. It wasn't a bad winter meetings, especially when we didn't have a lot of expectations for signings. And when you look at the winter meetings, besides Schwarber and Edwin Diaz got signed as a closer, and he's a shaky closer. Does the trumpet go with him? And then you also have who else was the big signing? Pete Alonso moves on. Man, the Mets are in trouble. Pete Alonso moves on and goes to the Orioles. There were a couple of big signings, but it was kind of a slow winter meetings. I feel like the White Sox did well for what we were expecting going in.
Well, the most important thing was getting that number 1 draft pick, right? Because Rock Chalowski is universally, which always makes me worried when it's the White Sox or any Chicago sports team, when we have like a universal number 1 pick. But he's a guy that, yeah, I mean, just you got to get excited about the fact that you have this potential generational talent.
He sounds like a Southsider, right?
Yeah,
Rock Chalowski.
Rock
Right?
Chalowski.
Like if he wasn't a baseball player, you would bump into him in Bridgeport. He would go to
Right.
St. Rita or something like that, right? I mean, like this is like a guy that, like, he's the guy from the neighborhood who can fix your car at a good price. He's Rock Chalowski. You can drink with Rock Chalowski. The women go nuts for Rock Chalowski. That's my feeling. That's a Southsider. I mean,
Rock Chalowski is the guy who's shirtless at a Brother Rice football game.
Yes. Rock Chalowski is shirtless at a Brother Rice football game.
Yes.
Rock Chalowski remembers all the best running backs from grammar school on the South Side, somewhere between the early 80s until the mid 1990s, and can rattle off their stats over his 5th or 6th Miller Lite at a pub someplace on the corner. Like, that's Rock Chalowski is a thing. And and they probably won't even draft him. Like, probably somebody else will do better. He'll hit 220 in his junior year at UCLA. And we don't even know if this is going to happen, right? His whole leg could snap in half before we even get to the draft. So we don't know right now. But right now, it's just kind of fun to have fun with it.
Yeah, meanwhile, you got a Jedi in the Rule 5 draft, Jedrickson Paez.
Yeah, he's a Jedi. He has a robe and a lightsaber, right? With that name?
He really does. He kind of looks like it, too, when you look at his headshot. He looks like he'd be backing up Mace Windu.
Yeah.
But you know, it is one of those things where you have 2 pitchers now from the Rule 5 draft that the Sox have a future with potentially, and are guys that now Zach Bove. You hired Zach Bove, your pitching coach, because of his developmental skills, right? That was the whole. That's his reason for being here, is his ability to develop pitchers and what he helped do with the Kansas City Royal pitchers, where they took a lot of raw talent and refined it to make the Royals, rotation and bullpen a pretty solid unit, right? Out of a bunch of guys that you don't really know much about. So if you can get Paez to be able to work, even though he hasn't been in the upper levels of the minors, injury concerns aside. If you can get him to be successful and work with him so that you can find good positions for him in the majors, kind of like the way they used Mike Vassell this year. And then with Alberto, I gather they just have to figure out if he can throw strikes, because if he can throw strikes, he sounds like a guy that could be one of those lightning in a bottle relievers that you look for and you pluck off of like a Rule 5 or off the scrap heap. Big, great arm, love the makeup, and you hate what he does with it. But if Zach Bove and the pitching coaches can help harness him and get him to throw strikes and get him to trust his stuff, then maybe you found a weapon. And that's all you want Chris Getz to be doing at this point, is finding weapons. Because, yeah, it was a quiet winter meetings, and they were not signing Kyle Schwarber or Pete Alonso. They were not going to do a big splash signing, so this is what you want. And then rumblings and rumors of guys like Dustin May and Pete Fairbanks, I like it.
And O'Hearn, and Ryan O'Hearn again.
And Ryan O'Hearn, of course.
And that's the funny thing. If you think about it, folks, Ryan O'Hearn, if they're looking for that first baseman, I mean, James Fox is talking about a corner outfielder, a corner infielder, a first baseman, essentially, and those pitchers that he was mentioning. And these are actual names that are swirling and rumored, and the White Sox are talking to the agents and things like that, supposedly. And look, if that's happening, Vargas is your third baseman. You've got Montgomery and Mydroth in the middle infielder. You got O'Hearn. Again, I keep bringing up Lenin Soso. Like, where is he going? Because if you're keeping both catchers, and Benintendi's got this Achilles thing, and Getz is talking about the idea that he may not play as much outfield this year as he did last year. Again, this guy's a trade piece that I think that we're waiting to see. Our team's interested in him, and what would they get back for him? Or does he really just sit on the bench and play like 2-3 times a week? And I don't think he's effective if you do that. So I think it's not the big story. It's an interesting story, though. He is remaking his lineup and remaking his team. And when you talk about these pitchers that they got, especially Paez, the first guy that they picked second overall in the Rule 5 draft, the Jedi. If you that guy right there, if not for the injury that slows him down, probably does a whole season in Double-A, as Fox was saying, and then the Red Sox probably protect him because he's top 15 in our pipeline right now. This is a guy that probably shouldn't have been available. I'm really excited about him. The other guy, you're right. They got to figure out what makes him work, and he may not work out. These are lightning in a bottle attempts to see if you can get a guy in and unlock his potential, basically in the off-season spring training. And if it doesn't work out, he's back to the other team. So this is like, do you think that you? But it sounds like when you look at what Getz says, they've been looking at these guys, and the consensus and the consortium in the room with all of his pitching guys is these were the guys they wanted. And they can't wait to get there and work with them. And that's all you can ask for from Rule 5 stuff. If the Sox have now unlocked somehow how to get Rule 5 guys and make them good. We always talk about, you talk about like Moneyball. Find the inequity. Find a thing that other teams aren't doing. Is this a thing that we're going to do?
Yeah, and don't forget Jackson Kelly, the guy that they took in the minor league portion of it, who's a sidewinding right-hander, okay, with in the minors. Oh my God, I'm so excited to watch him pitch. It's
that's
just
crazy.
Fun. Oh,
is he a submariner or just a sidewinder?
I think he's just. I've never seen a video of him pitching. I think he might be just a sidewinder, but it looks almost submarine.
Yeah.
But a 1.111 whip. It's all ones for his minor league career whip. And this is a guy that spent some time last year in Double-A. He's 25 years old. He's a guy that could show up in the bullpen as well.
That music means the Sox nerd. Dave Marin is going to wrap up this show as he does each and every weekend with his tidbits and trivia nuggets, which he also puts up on the scoreboard at the rate, but we get a more in-depth view. And a lot more stuff, it always feels like. And he's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience the downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore. Check out the Lamont Unlocked podcast with yours truly as we explore downtown Lamont and see the incredible holiday displays and all the events they have going on for the season. A great thing for family, for date nights, for just yourself wandering about and doing a little window shopping or actual shopping. See it all at LamontDowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, let's talk top overall pick, shall we? The Sox secured the first selection in the draft for the third time when they won the 2026 lottery at the winter meetings on December 8th. The last time the Sox picked first was 1977, when Harold Baines, who represented the Sox at the 2026 lottery, began his Hall of Fame career. Legend has it Bill Veeck, between ownerships of the Sox, first spotted Baines as a little leaguer on Maryland's Eastern Shore and tracked his amateur career until selecting him as an 18-year-old out of St. Michael's High School in Maryland. The first time the Sox had the top pick was in 1971 after the disastrous 1970 campaign in which they went 56-106. The Sox took catcher Danny Goodwin, a powerful left-handed hitting catcher, out of Central High School in Peoria. The Sox, with fledgling GM Roland Heeman on point, could never agree to terms with Goodwin. Reports of the day had Goodwin wanting $100,000 up front, unheard of at that time, for baseball and college. In early July of 1971, Goodwin spurned the Sox and enrolled at Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, making him the first top overall pick to go unsigned. In 1975, Goodwin went first in that draft, making him the first and only player to be the number one overall selection 2 times. Goodwin didn't have much of a big league career, but players like George Brett, Mike Schmidt, and Jim Rice, also picked in the 1971 draft where the Sox whiffed on Goodwin, sure did. Also in 1971, the Sox had the first overall choice in the now defunct secondary phase of the June draft, which was for previously selected but unsigned players. The Sox kicked off that little-known pick fest, which ended in 1986, by taking catcher Pete Varney out of Harvard. Varney, by the way, caught the 2-point conversion pass, which capped Harvard's furious comeback and forged a 29-29 tie in the greatest Harvard-Yale football game ever played. That was in 1968. As of right now, UCLA shortstop Rock Chowalski is the favorite to be the first choice in the 2026 draft. Should the Sox take him, Chowalski will join Rich McKinney, B.B. Richards, Steve Buechele, Jason DeLaro, Gordon Beckham, Tim Anderson, Nick Madrigal, Colson Montgomery, and Billy Carlson as shortstops taken by the Sox in the first round. While UCLA has had a successful baseball program over the years, the Sox have only drafted 9 players from the school. The most notable was pitcher Jim Parquet, whom the Sox made the 46th selection in the 1996 June draft. The only other UCLA product drafted by the Sox to play for the Sox was pitcher Wes Whistler, a second-round pick in 2004. Other non-drafted Bruins to play for the Sox include Nick Nastrini, Don Slaught, and Jerry Owens. And if you live in the Chicago area and we're hoping to see Chowalski play in person because UCLA is in the Big Ten, that's not going to happen unless you want to go to Columbus, Ohio the weekend of March 6th, Iowa City the weekend of March 27th, or East Lansing, Michigan the weekend of May 1st. Sorry, no trips to Evanston or Champaign this season for Chowalski and his band of Bruins this spring. Before I get to my zinger, let me remind you I am posting 2025 player reviews, birthday updates, a daily Sox list, and almanac items on Twitter and on my WordPress blog, which you can link to at soxinthebasement.com. My zinger? My next 2025 player review on Kyle Teel is almost finished, and it will be a beast. A teaser? Teal's .312 home average in 2025 was the highest by a Sox catcher in their current home and the highest overall by a Sox backstop since Carlton Fisk hit .345 at Comiskey Park in 1989. And the output was the highest ever by a Sox rookie lefty in their current home. That's it, fellas. Probably more than you wanted to know about the draft, the pride of Peoria Central High School, and the UCLA baseball program. And we'll see you next week for the Sox Nerd Christmas special.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.